Sometimes at night, the fire crackles louder than usual, as if it recalls those times when lightning was not just flashes in the sky, but a sign of the wrath of the gods. In these moments, I remember Olympia, the city where Zeus himself looked at people from his throne. His statue was so alive that it seemed to breathe, and even centuries later, standing there, you can feel something of its power is still here. It all started in Olympia. This is where once stood the sanctuary, which held one of the greatest sculptures of the ancient world, the Statue of Zeus. It was created by the famous master Phidias in the 5th century BC. For the ancient Greeks, it was not just an image of a deity. It was the king of the gods himself who came down to earth. The statue reached about 12 meters in height. It was in the temple, but its dimensions were such that, according to contemporaries, it seemed as if Zeus would rise and destroy the roof. Phidias depicted the god sitting on a throne of cedar encrusted with gold, ivory, and precious stones. In one hand, Zeus held a statue of the goddess Nike, symbol of victory; in the other, a scepter with an eagle on top. The feature of this sculpture was not only its greatness and wealth, but also in the technique. Phidias used a combination of ivory and gold to make the body look alive, and the clothes and decorations shone. In the light of the torches, the statue seemed animated. The features of the faces were softened, the eyes as if watching each movement. The ancient said, "Anyone who has not seen Zeus of the Olympic does not know how beautiful the world is." And in these words there was no exaggeration, but sincere faith. The statue became a symbol of the unity of the Greeks and a reminder of the divine beginning of their traditions. But like many miracles, Zeus did not survive time. The temple suffered from earthquakes, and the statue was moved to Constantinople, where it died in a fire in the 5th century AD. There is nothing left of it except descriptions and drawings on coins. And yet, her image continues to live in myths, in the words of historians, in the memory of humanity. The statue of Zeus became a symbol of how man, through art, tried to touch the most divine. But Zeus was only one of the 7, and his story is only the beginning of a path that leads through centuries in stone, where man strove for eternity. At the entrance to the harbor of Alexandria once stood a structure that the ancients called a miracle of light. The Lighthouse of Alexandria, or Pharos, was built in the 3rd century BCE by order of Ptolemy II. It was built almost 20 years, and the architect Soprat from Book worked on the project. The lighthouse was a giant of its time. According to various sources, its height reached from old to old. Imagine, it was one of the tallest buildings in the ancient world, comparable to modern skyscrapers. It had 3 tiers: square foundation, octagonal middle level, and cylindrical tower on top. At the very top was a torch, whose flame reflected in huge bronze mirrors. This light was seen by sailors tens of miles from the shore. For the ancient world, the lighthouse was not just a navigation facility. It became the symbol of Alexandria, Gorod, which was considered the gate of Egypt, center of trade and knowledge. There was also a famous library. Lighthouse and library together turned this city into the heart of ancient civilization. But like many miracles, he did not stand the test of time. Earthquakes in the 10th, 14th, and 15th centuries gave him a mortal blow. The tower collapsed, and its huge stone blocks were at the bottom of the sea. Nowadays, underwater archaeologists find these remains in the water, and they confirm the stories of ancient historians. The Lighthouse of Alexandria lived for almost 1,500 years, and even destroyed, it has left a bright mark. His image inspired the architects of the future, and the word lighthouse became a symbol of hope for all who seek light in the dark. But where the sea ends, there begins a desert. And in the middle of this desert, against all odds, man grew a paradise. Of all the wonders of the world, it is the hanging gardens of Babylon that are most controversial. Some consider them a definite reality, others a beautiful legend born by the imagination of ancient chroniclers. But the way they were described by ancient authors does not cease to amaze. According to tradition, the gardens were built in the 6th century BC by order of King Nebuchadnezzar II. They say he created them for his wife, the Median princess Amytis, who missed the green mountains of her homeland. The king gave orders to build terraces in Babylon on which trees, flowers, and vines grew. In the desert, where the heat and dust reigned, there was a whole oasis hovering over the city. The contemporaries describe this spectacle as follows. Multi-tiered platforms rose one above the other, and on the steps flowed streams of water. The complex system of irrigation raised moisture from the Euphrates, and even high on terraces flowed streams and noisy waterfalls. For that time, it was a real engineering miracle, because bringing water to a height of several tens of meters was extremely difficult. But what is surprising, archaeologists have not yet found unequivocal evidence of the existence of gardens in Babylon. There are no reliable ruins that can be confidently called their remnants. Some scholars suggest that they may not have been in Babylon at all, but in Nineveh, the capital of Assyria. Perhaps, over the course of centuries, memories of different cities have become intertwined and turned into one legend. Anyway, hanging gardens remain a symbol of the human dream of impossible. They show that man has always sought to turn the desert into paradise, and stone and sand into a flowering garden. And even if they never existed as we imagine them, the legend of them has become a miracle, a survivor of the ages. When the greenery dissolved in the sand of time, man turned to marble. Where the waves wash the shores of Asia Minor, he built a temple worthy of a goddess. In the city of Ephesus, on the coast of Asia Minor, once stood a temple to which the entire ancient world envied. The Temple of Artemis is one of the most majestic structures of its time, dedicated to the goddess of hunting, fertility, and the moon. The first sanctuary appeared here in the 7th century BC, but the miracle of which historians speak was built later, in the 6th century BC, with the rich support of the Lydian king Cressa. Chersiphron of Knossos became the architect of the temple, and his sons continued the work. The temple impressed with its size, length about 115 meters, width more than 50, and the height of the columns reached 18 meters. There were a total of 127, each decorated with carvings and patterns. For the ancient world, it was not just a sanctuary. The Temple of Artemis served not only as a religious center, but also as a place of trade, meetings, and even shelter. People from all corners of the Mediterranean flocked here to bow to the goddess and see the greatness of Ephesus. But the temple was destined to suffer more than once from disasters. In 356 AD, some Herocrat burned it, wanting to glorify his name. It is said that the same night was born Alexander the Great, and this was considered a sign that a new time had come to earth. The temple was later restored, making it even more majestic. But it was finally destroyed in the 4th century BC, when Christianity became the main religion of the empire. Today, there is only one pillar of the Temple of Artemis standing in ruins. But even this fragment gives a sense of scale. It is difficult to imagine how, in the middle of the ancient city, stood out a whole forest of marble columns shining in the rays of the sun. The Temple of Artemis is a reminder of how man was able to combine faith and beauty, creating not just buildings, but symbols of an entire era. But not only temples and gods inspired people. Sometimes miracles were born out of love and sorrow. On the coast of Asia Minor, in the city of Halicarnassus, in the 4th century BC, was built a structure that gave its name to the whole type of graves. This was the Mausoleum, the tomb of the Carian ruler of Mavola, erected by his wife Artemisia. Mausoleum combined architecture, sculpture, and engineering. Its height reached almost 45 meters, and inside there was a tomb decorated with marble reliefs. The building consisted of 3 parts: a massive dome, a colonnaded level, and a pyramidal roof, crowned by a statue of the chariot with figures of Mavol and Artemisia. Each level was decorated with sculptures created by the best craftsmen of the time: Scopas, Timothy, Bryaxius, and Laocar. For contemporaries, it was not just the burial of a ruler. Mausoleum became a symbol of power and greatness, a monument that should survive centuries. People came to Halicarnassus to see the tomb, which was considered a masterpiece of art. Mausoleum stood more than 1,500 years. Earthquakes destroyed it in the Middle Ages, and the stones were used by the Crusaders to build the fortress of St. Peter. But even in the ruins, it made an impression, and its name became obvious. Today, we call mausoleums all grandiose burial mounds, from the Indian Taj Mahal to modern monuments. From the mausoleum in Halicarnassus, only fragments and sculptures that can be seen today in the British Museum. But the very fact that this structure was included in the list of wonders of the world shows how much it impressed the ancients. But the man knew no peace. He rose again above the earth, and on Rhodes appeared a giant, meeting the dawn, facing the sun. On the island of Rhodes, at the entrance to its harbor, once stood a statue that ancient writers called one of the greatest wonders of the world, Colossus of Rhodes, the great creation of the sun god Helios, protector of the island. It was created in the 3rd century BC, after the inhabitants of Rhodes had defeated the troops of Demetrius Poliorcete. Trophies and sold weapons of the enemies brought funds for construction. Worked on Colossus' famous craftsman Hares from Lindos, a student of Lysimpa himself. The statue reached about 33 meters in height. It is approximately like a modern 12-story house. For the ancient world, it was an unheard-of spectacle. Colossus depicted Helios standing with his head raised, with a flaming crown around him symbolizing the sun's rays. One hand, he covered his eyes from the bright light, the other held a spear. Many later legends claimed that the statue stood directly at the entrance to the harbor and ships passed under its feet. But historians believe that this is a myth. Colossus most likely rose up near the port on a mighty stone pedestal. Colossus lasted only 56 years. In the 226th year before our era, a strong earthquake destroyed it, and the giant fell. But even the pieces lying on the ground remained a miracle. The ancients wrote that people came to look at the fallen statue and were amazed. Each finger was larger than a man, and the pieces of bronze looked like individual rocks. For centuries, the remains of Colossus lay there until the Arabs, conquering Rhodes in the 7th century, melted the bronze to melt. But his memory is still alive. Colossus of Rhodes became a symbol of pride and freedom, and his image inspired artists and sculptors for many generations. And here we go back to where the history of human defiance began, in Giza, to the Rocky Mountains that survived civilization. Among the sands of Egypt, on the plateau of Giza, stand the only of the 7 wonders of the world that survived millennia. The Great Pyramids are symbols of the ancient world that we can see today. They've been standing here for over 4,500 years and still keep secrets that have no definitive answers. The largest of them is the Pyramid of Cheops. Its height originally reached 46 meters, and it was the tallest structure on Earth almost 4,000 years ago. Built of more than 2 million stone blocks, each weighing several tons, it is striking not only in scale, but also in precision. The sides of the pyramid are oriented almost perfectly on the sides of the light, and the deviations are so small that even modern engineers are surprised. Next to it are the Pyramid of Hephaestus and the smaller Pyramid of Mycene. Together, they form a majestic ensemble, which today still causes awe. And at the foot of Hephaestus stands the Great Sphinx, a colossal apparition with the body of a lion and the face of a man, the guardian of the pyramid looking into eternity. Scientists are still arguing about how the Egyptians built such structures. Some talk about a complex system of ramps, others about wooden rollers and levers. But whatever way it was done, one thing is clear. It was the work of tens of thousands of people, the work of generations turned to stone. The pyramids were erected as tombs of pharaohs, houses of eternity, where the rulers had to find immortality. But over time, they became more than just burials. They became a symbol of the very idea of eternity that the ancient Egyptians sought in the afterlife. I saw the sun setting behind the pyramids. Huge shadows lay on the sand, and it seemed that these were not just stone structures, but giants who survived all civilizations. You understand? Much in the world collapses, disappears, becomes a legend, but pyramids stand, and may stand for thousands of years to remind us that man has always sought to defy time. So much for our journey through the 7 wonders of the world. You know, traveler, I've seen a lot. Miracles made by gods, time, and human hands. But the greatest are not made of stone or gold. They are within us. We grow when the wind rips up the leaves, when the rain washes away the traces, when life does not spare. In these storms, power is born. The tree, which has not known the struggle, does not know the sky. It stands at the edge of its shadow and drinks rain, not knowing why it lives. But that which has faced the storm reaches for the light, even when branches break. So is man. Every storm, every frost, not punishment, but a gift. They grow the rod. They teach standing. They teach not to bend in front of the wind, even if it seems stronger. And if ever a road leads you into darkness, do not be afraid. Remember that light does not live only in the sky. It lives in you. Now go. The wind will rise again. And the higher you look, the closer you are to the light.